Just after midnight, September 26, 1983, deep inside a secret command bunker outside Moscow known as Serpukhov 15, an engineer named Stanislav Petrov is sitting in the dark staring at a bank of glowing screens. He's a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, and tonight he's the duty officer in charge of the Soviet Union's brand new early warning satellite system. His one and only job is to watch these monitors and detect the launch of American intercontinental ballistic missiles before they can wipe his country off the map. Suddenly, the quiet hum of that bunker is just absolutely shattered by a deafening, screaming alarm. The screens right in front of Petrov flash a single, terrifying word in bright red: start. This system, which was supposed to be the flawless, totally infallible eyes of the Soviet military, is unequivocally declaring that an American nuclear missile has just launched from a base in Montana. Instantly, the entire duty crew snaps to attention.
To really get the suffocating panic in that room, we have to remember the geopolitical vibe of late 1983. The world was basically vibrating with tension. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Soviets had shot down a civilian airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, killing all 269 people on board. The US was furious, really ramping up its evil empire rhetoric and getting ready to deploy Pershing II nuclear missiles in Europe. Soviet leadership was gripped by this deep paranoia. They were totally convinced an American first strike wasn't just possible, it was imminent. They even had a massive intelligence ring, Operation Ryan, running specifically to anticipate the sudden outbreak of nuclear war.
And against that terrifying backdrop, Petrov is staring at his screen. The protocol for this exact moment, it's brutal. It's a literal ticking clock. Within the first minute, he has to confirm the reading. Within 5 minutes, he has to transmit that alert up to the highest chains of command. From there, Soviet political and military leadership would have maybe 20, 30 minutes tops to decide whether to launch a massive, civilization-ending retaliatory strike before the American warheads actually made impact.
As he's watching, the nightmare actually escalates. The screen isn't just showing one missile anymore. A few minutes later, it detects a second, then a third. Slowly, agonizingly, the total on the screen ticks up until it stops right at 5. 5 American intercontinental ballistic missiles hurtling toward the Soviet Union. But here's where Petrov does something incredible. He applies this completely unexpected inverse logic. He's a trained engineer, right? Not just a soldier programmed to blindly follow orders. He looks at that number 5 and hesitates. Because think about it, if the United States was actually kicking off World War III with a preemptive strike, they wouldn't launch a mere 5 missiles. That makes zero sense. They'd launch thousands. They would literally have to completely overwhelm Soviet radar and destroy command silos in a single, devastating blow. Launching just 5 missiles would announce an attack without actually winning the war. It was completely illogical. So, you've got this wild, split reality in the command center. On one hand, the billion-ruble satellite system is screaming that the attack is real, insisting with growing urgency that these missiles are in the air. But on the other hand, Petrov knows that the ground-based radar stations, the ones that would pick up the missiles once they crested the curvature of the Earth, are reporting absolute silence. Nothing. Yet, military protocol didn't care about his engineering intuition. Protocol strictly demanded that he report the satellite's warning up the chain immediately. Knowing that wasting even a few minutes could literally doom his entire country if those missiles were real, Petrov picks up the intercom line to his commander in the general staff. Risking his career, his freedom, and potentially the survival of his nation, he verbally overrides the machine. He tells his superiors, "I am reporting a false alarm." What followed has to be the most suffocating, agonizing 20-minute wait in human history. Petrov and his crew just sat there in the bunker, staring at the screens, watching the clock tick down. If he was wrong, millions of people were about to die, and he would have single-handedly prevented any chance of retaliation. They waited for the radar to blip, they waited for the ground to shake. But 20 minutes pass, and the radar remains perfectly clear. The warning was definitively, conclusively, a ghost. Okay, so what actually happened? How did the absolute most sophisticated early warning system in the Soviet arsenal almost trigger the end of human civilization? Obviously, an intensive investigation was launched immediately to figure out what caused this massive technological failure. You'd think it was a massive cyber attack or a catastrophic mechanical defect, but no. It was weather. It was an astronomical coincidence so bizarre they hadn't even programmed the computers to look for it. Sunlight was reflecting off the tops of high-altitude clouds over Montana at the exact, highly specific angle necessary to completely fool the infrared sensors of the Soviet satellite. The system literally saw a trick of the light, misinterpreted the glare as the thermal bloom of rocket engines, and enthusiastically recommended global annihilation.
Now, the political fallout from this realization? Incredibly awkward for the Soviet military. Think about it. If Petrov was right to ignore the alarm, it meant the multi-billion-ruble system was deeply flawed. And the glaring problem was that the senior officers who designed that system had already received prestigious medals for it. Admitting Petrov saved the world meant admitting decorated generals built a faulty doomsday machine. So Petrov wasn't rewarded. He was quietly reassigned to a less sensitive post, pushed into early retirement, and left to live out his days in pretty modest circumstances.
In fact, for over a decade, his actions remained an absolute secret. The entire world continued on, totally clueless about how close it came to the brink. It actually wasn't until the late 1990s, when his former commander published his memoirs, that the incident finally saw the light of day. Slowly, the world learned his name. He was eventually honored with the World Citizen Award and the Dresden Peace Prize before passing away in 2017 in a small apartment near Moscow.
But through all that delayed international recognition, all the documentaries made about him, Petrov was fiercely adamant about one thing. He consistently rejected the title of hero. He insisted he was just an ordinary guy, a pragmatic engineer who just happened to pull the right shift on the right night.
Yet, because he happened to be sitting in that chair, the trees outside his window kept growing. The children in his neighborhood grew up, and the cities he could see from his apartment building never burned. All because, on a September night in 1983, one man with a stopwatch and a set of doubts refused to believe a machine.